Hey everybody. Not much of an intro. I know. I made the graphic today and things, but I could not decide on a piece of music to go with it or a sound effect or whatever or something. I think it needs something, but I don't want it to be too dramatic and I don't want it to be too lengthy. But I'll figure out something. So this is a new segment that we're doing every Saturday. Rob's been asking me to do it for a while, actually. Like he had kept throwing out the idea, like, you should do like a little series like this and talk about this. And then we got to talking about ways to really improve the network and everything recently. And he was like, "You really should try this thing out. I mean, I'm telling you about it." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll give it a go." So I've expanded on the initial suggestion a little bit. So what is this all about? This is the Saturday Spiritualist. Okay, so every Saturday around this time, I might bump it up to 9:30 depending on if I have the time. It depends on when I can get my daughter to bed. So 10 p.m. for the moment, 10 p.m. Eastern time every Saturday, I'm going to look into the details, the histories, the practice of various alternate spiritualities and to try to give you some education or at least a better idea on what they're all about in case you're looking to expand your spiritual resources or if you're part of one of the big three, which is Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, and you're looking for something like, those aren't working for me, I want to try something else. This might help give you a bit of a helping hand. I am by no means an expert on all of these things, but I have done a lot of research on them and I'm continuing to do more research. And I hope in the process of us having these discussions that I can learn a little bit more, just as you folks can learn. So that is what I'm going for. And also hope that maybe I can kind of help steer you towards a better understanding of your own place in the universe and things. Not that I have all those kinds of answers or that I'm a genius or some kind of guru or anything like that. I haven't reached my nirvana as of yet. But maybe we'll get there together. I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic. So this might be a different kind of show from me than you have seen in the past because I'm typically not super optimistic of a person. So maybe this will be something interesting and it might be frightening. Who knows? Um, But tonight's episode isn't on a specific spirituality yet. I want to do some kind of introduction on what spirituality is versus being part of a religion and things of that nature, and maybe give you some tips and tricks if you're trying to become a more spiritual person on how you can kind of focus your thoughts and your mind on that kind of stuff. Um, so let's get down to it. What is spirituality and what is the difference between that and religion? Well, the difference is in structure and organization primarily. Religion in most cases is organized. It's organized religion. It's not often something that's just a it's not technically just a personal thing as much as it should be. In some of the better churches that I've seen, and I am not a religious person. I don't get into that anymore. When I was a lot younger, I tried to be, and I got really disillusioned with some things, and so I have not been religious in quite a long time. But at the same time, I'm not going to scream and shout at people who do choose to be religious. If you're Christian, that's great. If you're Jewish, that's great. If you're Islamic, that's great. If you're Buddhist, that's great. Whatever. As long as you're not coming to me and saying, you better do what we're doing or you've got a lot of problems, you're going to go to some terrible place or you're whatever. And because I don't believe that and I'm not into that. But a religion, all religions are spiritualities, but not all spiritualities are religion. That's a version of a phrase that I'm sure you guys have heard before. But because most organized religions started out as a philosophy or a spirituality of sorts and then grew into what they became. Religions generally have a lot of rather strict rules that you have to follow. Um, and there's not a lot of room in most of them to wiggle around, despite the fact that there are, just like in any other area of life, there are a lot of hypocritical people that claim to be religious, highly religious, and there are also a lot of hypocritical people that say they're highly spiritual, and there's a lot of hypocritical atheist people. So, as much as there's supposed to be hard and fast rules to this, not everybody will follow those kind of things. But the basics are, in theory, regardless of the practice, if you're going to be part of organized religion, you have to follow very strict rules. Now, in a spirituality, by contrast, you generally aren't bound to those things quite as much. They're a bit more forgiving in those areas. Um, you still, if you're going to call yourself a certain type of spiritual person, you probably should follow mostly what that spirituality entails. If you're going to be Wiccan, then you have to respect the natural world and you have to kind of lean more towards into that rather than, you know, buying an oil company and just drilling wherever you feel like it. And that's not a political statement against oil or anything like that. It's just, for example, if you call yourself a Wiccan, you shouldn't be driving along and tossing your Polar Pops out the window when you're done with them, right? Litter, that kind of stuff. Nobody's going to like crucify you for it, but it's generally a no-no. The other thing about spiritualities is they tend to be very individualized. Like there's a lot of I know a lot of people who will say yes, and again, I don't want to. I'm using Wiccan because it's a familiar one for a lot of people, but I don't want people to think that I'm picking on it because I'm not. I'm just using it for my example purposes. A lot of people will say, "Oh yeah, I'm Wiccan. I do this and I do this and I do this," whereas you'll meet somebody else who says, "Oh yeah, I'm Wiccan and I do this and this, but we do this instead of this." And it still counts because you're still following the overall ideals and the overall philosophies of what it is. Take a quick drink break. Now, if we're going to talk about spirituality, we also have to talk about atheism for a minute. And I've met a lot of people who say that they're atheists, and that's fine. I've been accused of being atheist myself many, many times. I don't think it's necessarily an insult, just like I don't believe that being Christian or Muslim or whatever should be something to be ashamed of, unless you're using those for bad purposes. Like if you're a Muslim who believes in killing off all the unbelievers, then that makes you kind of a problem. If you're a Christian who believes that we should chase off all these whatever types of people and bring the nation back to God, that's kind of problematic. Okay. But in general, the thing about atheism that I don't agree with is because I think there's too many things in the universe that we don't know and that we can't just chalk up to science necessarily. I think most everything can be explained scientifically eventually. But some things, even scientifically, are just, even if we understand the science, we can't replicate it. We can't change it. We can't do anything with it. We just know that it's there. And because of the science that we know that it works. But we're distinct, not able to really interact with it in a way that is comfortable. And I think that's where you kind of have a little bit of faith. You have to have a little bit of faith and belief in this stuff, that it's all going to work the way that you expect it to. I mean, you don't have to necessarily believe that the precise mix of oxygen and nitrogen and whatever in the air we breathe is what keeps us alive, but it's there. It's something that happens, whether you believe in it or not. And I think there's a lot of other things in the universe that are like that. And while we do understand that mixture of gases in that example, there are other things that I don't think we do understand and that we're not going to understand and possibly may never understand. We just kind of have to take it on faith that they work, that that's how things are. And while many atheists that I've met have been friendly and they've just been like, oh, yeah, I get that. I just don't believe in these deities and whatnot. And that's perfectly fine. There are other people who are they're militant and they're just kind of like, no, there's absolutely no belief. It's no belief at all. You can't believe in anything. You either know it or you don't. And that's just the way it is. They're doing themselves a disservice, I think, because once again, there are a lot of things that we kind of have to take on faith, whether you want to or not. Um, but yeah, that's my take on that. So, spiritualities. There are a lot. Are almost as many different spiritualities and spiritualistic paths and practices as there are people in the world. Really, I mean, there are billions of belief systems out there that people have built for themselves, and they're not wrong, not really. I mean, some of them, like, you've got some problems with certain things, like if you have a belief system that includes murdering small animals for no particular reason, like, oh, it's just a sacrifice to my dark lord or whatever, that's problematic. It's not really serving you spiritually. Let's get into that a little bit. Let's get into if it's serving you spiritually. To get into that discussion, you kind of have to have at least an open mind in believing that we have some kind of internal need or quality that wants to be spiritually fulfilled. Okay, it's an intangible. It's you can call it a soul, you can call it a spirit, you can call it, whatever you want, but there's something inside of us, some part of our brain, maybe it's just a chemical reaction in there that occurs in everybody. Who knows? And we're just giving it fancy names like a soul, but regardless, there's something in everyone that wants to believe in something. That we want to believe that there's something that's either greater than ourselves that we can aspire to, or that we can look on in a positive light. And so, whatever that quality is, it's something that's persisted throughout thousands of years. The Egyptians, which is one of the belief systems that I've always been kind of fascinated with, they believed that in a soul, they believed in a soul that was made up of two parts, and they believed, and I always get them backwards, so I'm gonna just go with it and hope I don't mess it all up. But they had the Ba and the Ka, okay, and there were two parts of a complete soul that made a person. Now, when a person, one of those parts, and again, I don't remember which is which, the Ba and the Ka, I always mix them up, so I'm not gonna try. I'm just gonna say it one or the other. The one soul is your animating spark. It's your self divinity, or whatever you want to call it. It's what we would consider like a human soul. It animates you. It gives you life and that kind of stuff. The other part is your individuality, like your thoughts, your dreams, the things you've learned and whatnot. And it's distinct in that it's your thinking part, but you have to have the two parts working together to function as a human being, as a proper human being. When you pass on, when you die, they believed the soul split. One part went on to rejoin a universal life force of the universe, and the other went on uh, to do the feather balancing thing in the land of balance against I think it was Anubis. You would balance against Anubis, and then if you were pure, it's basically putting your heart on the scale, that kind of thing. But that half of the soul would go there, and then would go on to a eternal reward or an eternal punishment of some kind. But the other half of you, like I said, would rejoin a universal life force and then get sent back out and paired with a new other half of the soul when a new human is born, and that would be fresh. But the fresh part would have the old consciousness, the old life force that has been around for forever because it was supposed to be eternal, to help animate it and guide it and move it forward into the future, which I always thought was really interesting. And there's been different ideas like that. In modern times, there's been some strangeness with that, with the idea of the soul. It's famously been said, and I don't know if they still believe it, because this is something that used to be said when I was a kid, and I've never really gone into research to see if it's still a common thing or if they've adapted to the modern world more. But when I was younger, people would say, "Oh yeah, you can't take pictures of the Amish with a camera because they believed it would steal their soul, and their soul would then inhabit the picture and not the person." So people have ideas like that where the soul can be tampered with, it can be messed with, it can be stolen. You get that in voodoo as well, in old voodoo, Haitian voodoo. Uh, the Bokar, which is like a witch doctor, when you die, he's said to go and capture your soul in a jar, and then he can use that to raise your body to do his work as a zombie. So so there's lots of interesting ideas about the soul. And again, whether it exists or not, we don't have any direct evidence for that scientifically, medically. We've had many stories where people have said when they're with a loved one and their loved one dies in a hospital or wherever, they've seen sometimes a last breath, like a wisp of something come out. And there's been like supposedly somebody um, had a machine or a medical device that would measure, they did a study on it. They measured over the course of several terminal patients that something was leaving a person's body, whether it was a energy or whether it was a soul or a life force or whatever. They believed it was the soul of the person. And so you've got different stories like this to say that we have some kind of animating spark, to say that we have some kind of life force. And if, again, this life force is something that exists individually, it's something that, and I'm thinking about how to put this. It's supposed to be eternal. It's supposed to be uh, something that lasts forever, which is a big concept for us because for most people, nothing can last forever. Everything eventually breaks down. Even stars will burn out, gases will dissipate, people decay, plastic eventually even will eventually break down. But it's I have some thoughts, but I'm also having like a difficulty kind of translating into the words because it's a tough subject for a lot of people. But assuming that the spirit or the soul exists, then it's a common belief, and I kind of share in this, that if it exists, it's something that comes around more than once. And I don't necessarily want to say that it's like a past lives kind of thing, but it kind of is. In Near Eastern philosophy, like in India and in Tibet and some of those places, um, they believe in a process called samsara, which is a cycle where as when a person dies, the soul goes on, and if it hasn't learned enough to earn peace with itself, then it has to come back and it has to become a new being and go through a new life and learn new experiences. And people can go through hundreds or thousands of these rebirths, so to speak, according to samsara, before they reach nirvana, which is ultimate enlightenment. But part of the thing about that is also that enlightenment leads to oblivion, basically. It means once you've completed the cycle enough times and you've learned enough and you're pure, you don't have to go back into the cycle anymore. So you're finished. and you just become part of the universal consciousness, which is kind of a frightening thing. But I kind of believe parts of that. I believe that there are things that we're supposed to learn and that we get recycled back in, so to speak. Our energies get recycled back in to relearn or to do things differently. How many times that is supposed to happen, I don't know. It's just a thought. You're more than welcome to think that I'm completely wrong, and that's perfectly fine. But people will do different things, have different experiences, and that's supposed to enrich the spirit as it revolves and completes the cycle and things like that. Quiet night in the chat room. I've got a couple of watchers, and I know some people are going to be tuning in, but it is kind of a sensitive, strange topic here. So I'll understand if you guys don't want to chime in a whole lot with your thoughts, because I don't want anybody to feel like they need to be embarrassed or anything by putting themselves out on in the chat publicly for everybody to see. It's okay. If you do want to just, say something, by all means, you are welcome to. So spirituality. Let's look at that a little bit. Spirituality is a way to enrich our inner selves without tying ourselves to a very strict set of scriptures and laws and things of that nature. Whereas in religion, like for example, Islam, they're not supposed to eat pork, which has basis in history. The reason they weren't supposed to eat pork, just like the Jews weren't supposed to eat pork, in history, was because they lacked the ability in some communities to cook it well enough to make it safe to eat. That's like they're not supposed to eat shellfish because shellfish is notoriously difficult to get right and not give you um, food poisoning. And if you're in an older society like that and you don't have the medical advances that we do nowadays, food poisoning could kill you. It could very easily kill you. So, and that's like a real world thing that they codified into their religion. Um, Now, here's a good question from Ingrained Cyclist. And he asks, do you think the idea of an eternal soul could be due to the universal fear of an end? Not an end at death, but that the soul will eventually have an end. And that's a very good question, because that's where a lot of people, that's where spirituality sometimes springs from for a lot of people. I say sometimes, but actually for the majority of people, it springs from fear more than anything else, which is unfortunate because it should spring from a place of hope, a hope for the future or a hope that things will be different. But it does kind of spring from a deep seated fear that we don't know what's going to happen. A pure atheist will say, hey, when you die, you die. It's meat in the ground and you're gone. And that's harsh, but they could be completely right. I mean, once the animating spark is gone, what's left? So we have this fear that if we don't believe in something or that we don't follow these rules or do something, that's what's going to happen to us, that we're going to just disappear. And it's a fear of nothingness, a fear of absolutely the end of all things. And the big religions tend to use that a lot as well. The big religions will use that. They'll say, hey, if you don't believe in us, that's what's going to happen to you. If you believe in us and you do what we tell you, you're going to be rewarded. You're going to go on. You're going to exist longer. You're going to keep going. But if you don't, that's it. You're gone. You're done. No more you. And I don't think we can fathom that, honestly. Like, we sit here and we think our constant little chattery thoughts all the time. And I don't think we can fathom nothing. I don't think we can adequately understand that all of this in our heads could just be gone, that there'd be no more thoughts, there'd be nothing, that we would not exist at all. We can't see a non-existence outside of ourselves, because this is all we've ever known. All we've ever known has been our existence. So how could we understand that? And that frightens people. It scares people. And like I said, the big religions tend to use that. They tend to use that as kind of a weapon to bring people in. Spiritualities, on the other hand, tend to be, again, more individualized. And while there is still the potential for a lot of fear there, they do tend to say things more like, well, you know what? Even if there's nothing else, it's okay. Wiccans, when you die, your body will nourish the earth. You'll be able to help raise plants and help nourish animals and take care of more life. You will be causing more life. And so a lot of people go that way because that's pretty attractive for some people. You're still going to be done, you're still going to be over, but your legacy as a person will continue whether anybody else notices it or not. You're not going to have like a statue in a city somewhere. You're not going to have a road named after you necessarily, but you're going to be continuing to take over, or not take over. We're not supervillains here. I might be, but you aren't. Um, you're still going to be taking care of the natural world when you're gone. Um, and that's the other part of the flip side here. Ingrained Cyclist also says existing for eternity sounds terrifying, even more than being nothing. And I don't think humans can have a real grasp of eternity, and that could be true as well. Um, that's a difficult thing because, as it is, basically your life is your eternity. Like, you can't imagine a time when it would be over, but you don't want to imagine a time where everything that you've seen come and go just keeps on going and gone, and you just repeat the same things forever. We need fresh stimulation. We need to, keep moving forward. So it's a super, super difficult concept, and I think that's what leads people towards all of these different religions and spiritualities. Um, Now let's talk about some practical things. Some practical things that you can do if you want to become a more spiritual person without having to really lock yourselves in to a specific belief pattern, or join a church or do that kind of stuff. And I don't want to talk bad about that. I know I'm coming off really negative about organized religion because, unfortunately, a lot of it has given itself a bad name. A lot of major events in history have given Christianity and Islam and Judaism some pretty bad reputations. And while they're not all deserved, some of them are, you know what, you got to take responsibility for how you have spread your beliefs in the past. But I've known quite a few people of those religions who are great people, and they've never done a bad thing, at least, relatively in their life. They've never acted horribly in the name of their religion. So, I can't blame the religion itself. I can blame certain leaders and I can blame certain parts of it, but I'm not going to blame the people involved necessarily unless they individually are terrible people in the name of their religion, which I have met some of those too. But regardless, getting off the topic. So if you want to be a more spiritual person and you're not sure how, and this is just my advice, these aren't like, I'm not some super expert. I don't have it all figured out. I went through a lot of study and a lot of research and a lot of, searching within myself many years ago. And I still sometimes do nowadays, just to kind of check on my actions and see if they're in line with how I think a person should behave. So take it for what you will. You can take or reject anything that I'm about to tell you. Um, but for me, the first step in becoming a more spiritual person is just deciding, first off, that you want to believe in something. You got to take the step and you got to be honest with yourself and say, you know what? There are things in this world that I can't explain. There are things in this world that seem magical, or they seem terrifying, and they seem impossible. and I can't explain them, and I don't know anybody that can help me explain them, and no book has been written that teaches it, and no science is around to explain it to me. So I have to be willing to acknowledge that these things take faith. That I have faith that, okay, this is all going to work out, or everything's going to function the way it should, or whatever. So the first step is just opening yourself up to the belief in the impossible, because a lot of things are, as we see them, impossible. The next step after that is to also acknowledge that you're not always going to get it right. You're not going to be a perfect person. Spirituality isn't about being perfect. The big religions sometimes will say, if you do all these big rules that we tell you to follow, then you'll be a perfect person and you will go on to the paradise that's been set aside for you. It is impossible, strictly impossible, to be a perfect person. You cannot please all of the people all of the time. You cannot please yourself all of the time. You're going to have days where you just, I'm not feeling it. I feel upset. I feel whatever. You cannot be 100% happy and content with your life all of the time. But maybe if you open yourself up to belief a little bit, you can acknowledge that, you know what? Some days are going to suck, but that's okay. There's tomorrow. There's always the next day. There's the next day after that. And I know that might not be the best advice, say if you're a terminal cancer patient, you're on a limited time. But maybe in that case, and I don't want to presume to advise you because I'm not in that position and I don't want to come off insulting in that way. But maybe for you that means that every day is the next best day of your life until it's gone. Maybe for you, you just live the best you can, and maybe being a spiritual person can help carry you through some of those moments where it seems like, well, what am I working towards? The end is just a few days away or a few months away or whatever, and I can't avoid it. If it was me, I would just continue the way that I am until that happened, because either it'll change miraculously or unmiraculously, or it won't. I don't struggle against inevitability, but I also don't believe that inevitability is a thing. I believe that until something stops me, then I'm just going to keep on going. And that's kind of an arrogant outlook. I get that. It is kind of arrogant, but it's freeing in a way. It doesn't mean that I'm reckless. It doesn't mean that I'm going to go and like walk across traffic and be like, nobody's going to hit me because ah, la, la, la. It's not looking for trouble because you believe you can get around it. It's just saying, you know what? Whatever happens is going to happen. I'll do my best to be safe, but whatever happens is going to happen. And I kind of lost track where I was going with that for a minute, but I'm going to try to rewind and get back on it. So, becoming more spiritual, that's where we're at. Another thing you can do, I know religion has prayers. They have these things that you repeat, that you say. And it's not entirely like, I don't, I'm a really, really kind of punk rock, kind of anti-authority, kind of like nobody rules over me kind of person. So I don't pray because I don't follow what most people would say is a greater power. I don't look at deities and things and be like, oh well, they're greater than me. I have to ask them to forgive me. I have to ask them to help me and that kind of stuff. I don't do that. I'm not subservient to anyone or anything, which again sounds arrogant. I can't help that. But there is something to be said about repetition and quote unquote the power of prayer, because a lot of people, there are plenty of stories where you're together in a hospital room with somebody who's really sick and people all start praying and they miraculously recover. It could be coincidence. It could very well be coincidence, but it could also be personal energy and willpower from all those people combined, willing that person to be better. And their combined willpower was stronger than whatever the thing was. And so, spiritually, we have similar things. We have mantras. We have things that we can tell ourselves, that we can repeat. Um, in certain left hand and Wiccan kind of paths, they have the uh, as above, so below, which is um, as it happens with great things, it happens with small things. The big events can interact with the small events and vice versa. Everything's connected, and that kind of ties into science as well. It ties into string theory, quantum mechanics, how everything's actually connected. So there's a little bit of science in everything, and that's where mine usually comes from. That's where my outlook usually comes from. But we have these mantras, people who are spiritual, things that we can tell ourselves, that we can repeat to ourselves, that are kind of like, okay, let me take a break. Things are kind of crappy right now. Let me take a moment and just collect myself. And when you do that, you tend to say things like, um, "It is what it is." That's a common one that people use for their relationships. You know what? I'm having relationship problems. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but you know what? It is what it is. And they grit their teeth and move on. And I'm not talking about abusive relationships. I'm not talking about like domestic abuse and people beating each other up, because that should be something that if that's happening to you, don't do that. Get out of that. Or if you're the person doing that, shame on you. You know, abuse is abuse. So, but it's something that people tell themselves that, you know what? It is what it is. And they move on. And so developing kind of like a mantra, something that you can say to yourself with repetition to kind of get you through different times. That's a form of spirituality, and I think it's helpful. So it's something that you can do. Whereas some other people would say, "Hey, dear Almighty God, I hope you can see that I'm having problems here. I hope you help lift the burden," and things like that. It's very similar. It's, again, not to bash Christianity or some of those other guys, but it's a mental thing. You're convincing yourself and the universe that while things may be kind of crappy, they could get better. And you're just going to go with it and hope it gets better. It's like how I hope my daughter would usually go to the bathroom before she goes to bed so she doesn't have to come out during the show every 5 seconds to go potty. But she's a kid. Whatever. Um, Other things you can do is you can do different exercises. You can get into different hobbies that help you express creativity, or that help uplift you. Um, People who are into spiritualities often get into crystals. They get into herbs. They get into divination, all that kind of stuff. Now, divination, of course, is a tricky area because you can't rely on that 100%. I have tarot cards and I do tarot readings sometimes. I keep them very spare because I don't want to wear it out. I don't want to do a reading every single day and then it just becomes like, oh, it's another tarot reading, blah, 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 because it loses all of its meaning. It loses all of its potential. And at the same time, when I do a tarot reading, I don't hold to that 100%. I don't believe that that is 100% the assumed outcome or answer to a problem, because things are constantly in flux, things are constantly in motion. But it's a way to help kind of center myself and look at something from a different angle. People do the crystals, they do the healing crystals with the chakras and all that other kind of stuff. And whether you believe in all that or not, it's up to you. You find your hobby, find your focus, and use that to help develop yourself, to help yourself feel, slightly better, to help, make more sense of things around you. And we all have those kind of things. I mean, uh, even mundane things, even more mundane things like me playing my Xbox. Getting into these games helps my mind kind of focus on something else than maybe a bad day I've had or crappy things in the world that I can't stop. Like I'm notoriously irritated by politics in the United States, and there's not a whole lot I can do about that. I don't have the charisma or the reputation to be able to go out and become a representative myself, so I can't change things from the inside. Um, I've made different choices about how I participate in the process, but for the most part, when these things that I don't agree with happen, there's not much I can do about it. And so I do other things. I escape into my video games. And yes, that's a little bit of escapism, but it's also a little bit of focusing. I don't dive into there and then live my entire life in a fantasy world about video games. Some people do, and that's problematic. But for me, it's something else. Same thing with music. I use music as kind of a therapy. Um, or I used to. I don't listen to music hardly as much anymore because my daughter is younger, and I don't want to expose her to some of the music that I listen to just yet because I don't think she's quite prepared for it. Um, so I don't get to listen to a lot of it anymore because most of my music is a little rough. I like really harsh music most of the time, but I use it sometimes in a spiritual sense. Like I will sometimes, if I'm kind of contemplative, if I want to, I don't say I meditate necessarily, but if I'm in a meditative kind of mood, I'll put on music that'll accompany that. And those are ways, like with the big religions, you have the hymns, you have the religious songs, you have all those kind of things. It's very similar. It's a way for people to emotionally connect with their beliefs. And Ingrained Cyclist is right. He says meditation is super cliche, but it helps him out. And that's true. I mean, people like when I say meditation, a lot of people instantly think, oh, he's sitting there doing the that kind of stuff. That's not necessarily what meditation is. Meditation is basically just sitting quietly, clearing out all of the mental deadwood, all of the things, breathing, and just centering. It's just basically just getting yourself into a calm place. And that is a really super helpful thing to do. It's like the grown up version of counting to 10 when you're super angry as a kid. You just take a minute, you breathe a little bit, look at things more clearly. It is super helpful. It's definitely helpful. I appreciate you tossing that out there too. Um, and there's ways you can do that and enhance that a little bit. You can use a little bit of light music. You can put on incense or a calming, a scented candle. You can do all kinds of things. You can have a little bit of drink as long as you're not going to be getting completely drunk and plastered because that's not really all that spiritual. The ancients did use alcohol in a lot of very spiritual rituals. And except for some of the party cults like the Dionysus and the Bacchus cults of Greece and Rome, apart from those, most of the time, while they enjoyed drink, you weren't supposed to get completely drunk because then you lost sight of everything. You lost inhibitions and you became less. You weren't being spiritual anymore. Then you were just partying too hard. So within reason, you know, moderation, moderation. And I'm guilty myself of not always having moderation. This is my first drink today. Sometimes I'll have two or three before bedtime and I'll be feeling pretty buzzed and I'm Probably a bit more out of it than I should. But we do our best. We do our best. And if you do have a problem, like if you have an alcohol problem, then by all means do try to get some help. Okay, I don't want to trivialize that or anything like that. Alcohol is a very big thing for me, but at the end of the day, I still have food in my fridge. I still have my utilities on. I still have my family taken care of. So my money is not 100% poured into a bottle. I know my limits. And so, yeah, meditative practices. Um, yeah, once again, a good comment from Ingrained Cyclist. Meditation is a bit like exercise. You don't want to do it, but after you do, you realize you feel better, especially the more consistent you are. And that's what it is, consistency. With these mantras, with um, these breathing exercises, the meditation, these different kind of things, um, these can help make you more of a spiritual person. It seems like a lot of people are going to yell at me and be like, well, these don't involve anything ritualistic and they don't involve anything that calls on the spirit world or the great deities or anything like this. How is this spiritual? Because it's improving your inner self. And that's where your spirituality is. It's on the inside, it's in your mind. All of this is in your mind. Religion and spirituality are all a mental thing. Um, and again, I know I'll have some people say, well, no, my religion, we follow this God and they're not. They're outside and they're real and don't you dare insult them. And I'm not. I'm not trying to insult any of that kind of stuff. For me, all of that is mental. That's just how I feel. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I don't believe in the same thing you believe, but I'm not going to go up and tell you, you're full of it. You don't know what you're talking about. It's all in your head because I could be wrong. I could be wrong. Meteor could fall tomorrow, smack me in the head. I'm dead. And I wake up. Oh, it's the whole Pearly Gates thing. It's real. Oh my goodness, is my face red? That could happen. I don't think it's going to, but it could happen. I don't know. So I'm not going to make fun of you for it if that's what you believe. And that's kind of where me and Rob are at. Rob is a very more of a religious person with a hint of spirituality. He's kind of half and half. He does have some very particular outlooks on religion, and I don't want to like speak for him. If he wants to talk about it more in depth, then we'll have him on and he'll talk about it because I'm actually looking forward to having people who are parts of these other spiritualities. Like I'd like to have somebody who's a Wiccan on the Saturday Spiritualist having a talk with me about it. I'd like to have a Buddhist. I would like to have I would like to have a Pastafarianism person. I would like to have somebody who legitimately follows the flying spaghetti monster. If you 100% actually believe in all that, I want you in here. I want to talk to you about it. There's people who believe in absurdism, and I'd like to have them on here. I'd like to discuss all this kind of stuff with you people because that's just how it is. I'm open to all that. Um, but yeah, those are just a few things you can do to open yourself up to becoming a more spiritual person. And I think that you will be doing yourself a benefit in the long term. Even if you're 100% like, I'm an atheist, don't believe in any of that kind of stuff. Nope. There is something in your life that you use to anchor yourself. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. It's not like a moral code of conduct. We're not getting into things like the commandments and um, the common sense of don't kill people, that kind of stuff. We're not getting into that quite as much. We're exploring more the deeper significance of how these things make you feel and how they help you as a person, not necessarily in how they keep you on the moral trajectory, the moral ethical trajectory. We might address that in a future show, but that's less of what I'm trying to do with these. I'm more trying to kind of broaden your horizons a little bit and help everybody out there become, a little bit more at peace with yourselves. Because I'll tell you, I've been back and forth a lot. I am not always the high point of inner stability. I'm pretty good. And I don't mean that again to sound arrogant or sound like I've got it figured out. I have things pretty much in control up here, but there are a lot of days where I'm just so frustrated. And I'm just like, oh, goodness, testing me, testing me, testing me all the time. But I do what I can. And that's what being spiritual is all about. It's knowing that you are an imperfect person, knowing that you are going to mess up, that you're going to screw up, but you're going to get back up and you're going to do your best. And you're going to try to make yourself a better person, which in turn may make everyone around you better people, because that same energy will bleed off of you and around you. And hopefully it'll make everything better. Sounds like a bunch of neo hippie nonsense, probably, right? But that's what I think. That's what I think. So here we are. We're at the last few minutes of the show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. The future episodes are going to focus more on specific paths of spirituality. Like, we're going to get into Wicca, of course, because that's the most popular one that's out there right now. We're going to get into a lot of other things, left-hand path stuff, because that's an area that I've done a lot of personal study. We're going to get into that. And we might get into areas of ritual and things of that nature if you want to get into it. I have done some ritually things, but they've been very personal for me. They haven't been things where I get together with a group. I've only done a couple of things that have included people that weren't me in what I was doing. And they were very specific, targeted applications of willpower and energy. Okay, but we'll get into some of the process for that and how it has impacted me personally and how it may potentially impact you if you're amenable. If there is a particular brand of spirituality or outlook that you would like me to investigate and talk about on the show, or if you would like to come out to the show and talk to me about it, leave a comment. You can leave a comment after the fact. You don't have to have been live on the show. This is going to be all on demand. It's going to stay on the YouTube channel. It's going to be in the Facebook group. And I also put it on my own personal Facebook to try to, get a little bit more attention to it. And so if you would like to be on the show, or if you have a suggestion for other things to be on the show, drop me a message. I would love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to discuss some things with other people. I think it's a great topic, both for open-ended discussion and for debate, because once again, I could be wrong about all of this. I could be 100% wrong, and I accept that. I accept that I could be wrong. I don't believe it. There's that arrogance again, but I accept that I could be wrong. And that's the difference too. A lot of times with religion, you don't accept that you're wrong because you don't believe you could be wrong, and 100%, even if shown evidence to the contrary, it's kind of like, no, nope, nope. You're just trying to test me. You're just trying to shake my faith. You're the dinosaur bones that the devil put here. Not everybody's that extreme, but there are a few people. Yeah, so we're going to get into all these different things for the future of the show. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I had a pretty good time talking about it. I felt pretty good getting all this out and getting it out there, and I just hope that in the long term, that as episodes of this go on, I don't know how many episodes I'm going to be able to do about it, because there's only so many. I mean, there's so many spiritualities out there, but I don't know how much I'm going to be able to talk about all of them. Hopefully, it enriches some part of your life, or gives you some pause or something to think about. Because that's the whole point. It's something to think about. Okay. So that's the last 5 minutes. Business stuff. Tomorrow is Sunday, unless you're watching on demand, and then it's any day of the week. But for me, tomorrow is Sunday. There is nothing going on Sunday. We don't currently have a show on Sunday. Monday is the next episode of the of the Let's Talk About This podcast on Spreaker, and that is also broadcast to YouTube and Deezer and iTunes and Amazon and Spotify and all these different places. I was going to have a guest. I'm not sure if I will or not. I'm going to talk to him and see if he still wants to come on. If not, I'll have a new topic for you. So Monday night, 9:30 p.m. Let's Talk About This podcast. Tuesday, Twitch Tuesday, I'll be playing on my Twitch channel, DMGRGN. And I'll be playing a game that I've never played before, because every Tuesday on Twitch, I play a game on my Xbox that I have never played before. I have a couple of choices. We'll see what I pick. Wednesday, we don't have anything so far. It's a clean slate. Thursday, it's another episode of the Uncanny Spirits Club, building up until next month with St. Patrick's Day. Every episode is moving towards there. And then Friday, we have another episode of This Uncanny Earth. So a pretty packed lineup. We will at some point have our Wednesday and Sunday slots filled as well, but I don't think they're going to be by me. I think those are going to be for Rob to do content, because I have a lot. I have a lot of content that I'm doing already. But yeah, we have a lot of stuff that we're doing. The Uncanny Media Network is growing, it's expanding. Don't forget to follow the channels. Spider Does Things on YouTube, This Uncanny Earth on YouTube, This Uncanny Earth Official, the group on Facebook. Let's Talk About This on Spreaker, Spreaker.com. It's like speaker, but with an R. And follow both of our Twitch channels, DMGRGN, that's me, and the official This Uncanny Gaming channel, which is mostly Rob. And yeah, lots of good content. There's so much stuff that we do under the umbrella now that you have no excuse. There's something for everybody. Okay. So that's it. 2 minutes left, and I'm going to go ahead and cut out of here. And I hope to have an outro soon, and some kind of intro sound, either a song or a sound effect or something. I don't know. I worked on some stuff today, and I just couldn't figure out something that I liked. But until next time, be well.